today I've just been shown a research that indicates that there's a language in this country, in the Banda district of the Bono region, with only 6 native speakers. 6 speakers aged between 48 and 96.
Oh, it'll be gone soon.
So that language, as you can guess,
It's on its way out.
It's on its way out. How do we preserve our languages? All right, so let's get onto the phone lines now, because we've been joined on the phone by Professor Clement Appah, who is head of the Linguistics Department at the University of Ghana. Prof, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Winston, and thanks for the opportunity.
Great. So I realized that you sent me a document this morning about the Dompo language, where they have only 6 speakers aged between 48 and 96, an indication that clearly in the next few years, when these speakers leave the surface of the earth, if they don't get any new speakers, the language is gone.
That's right.
But the question is, and there are other languages that are facing extinction. I'm sure you'll tell us more later. But how did we get here? Why are we faced with the prospect of losing some of our languages?
Okay, so thank you very much. And I think that the documentary did justice to the causes of language shift, language transfer, language replacement, language assimilation, which are all terms for people shifting from their language to another language consistently over a period of time. And that is just the first stage of what we are seeing now. So language shift happened, then it leads to language endangerment, and then ultimately language death or language loss. So the documentary mentioned one of the causes that people shift because of the prestige associated with languages around them. People shift because of the perceived socioeconomic attraction. People shift because of political dominance that they seem to believe they will have if they shifted to another language, or sometimes just the perceived prestige of the language close to them. So there are many reasons why we have the situation we have. People think that it is more prestigious to speak a dominant language, and indeed it is, because it opens doors. If English is the official language and you don't speak English, then there are certain doors that you can't open, that won't open for you because you don't have it. However, that is not always the case. There may be other reasons why people shift, some of which I've already mentioned.
Okay, so today, for instance, and all of us are becoming, victims of this, if I could put it that way. All of us, because many of us parents speak English to our children. Even when attempts are being made, you come back from work one day and the child is speaking English to you, because they spend long hours in school, and in school it is English. I know that parents listening to us right now are probably asking themselves, what can I do? I haven't done anything wrong. I just heard my child speaking English to me after coming back from school. So where's my problem? Or what is my problem?
Yeah. So actually, the child hasn't done anything wrong. If you went to town and you learned a new song and came home and sang it to your parents, would you have done anything wrong? No. If you went to town and then you heard of a new recipe in town and came to your parents and told them there's a new recipe in town, I want to use it to cook a meal for you, you wouldn't have done anything wrong. The problem will be if you decided that from that day on, that is the only recipe you're going to use. From that day on, that is the only language song you're going to sing. That will be where the problem is. And so when we advocate for people to use the indigenous languages, we are not saying that don't speak any other language. We are saying that language is a resource. There are things hidden in your indigenous languages. Don't move away from it, because in doing that, you deprive yourself of the knowledge embedded, the cultural knowledge, and all the other things embedded in your language. That is what you use. So parents who were saying that my child came from school and is speaking English, so I decided to speak English. No, we're not saying that don't speak English. Speak English to your child, but speak your native language as well to your child. So let the child know that it is not a crime to speak your native language. It is not wrong to know and master your native language. Actually, it should be one of the symbols of pride that we have, that we have multiple languages and we haven't missed our own indigenous language.
Now, you've raised a point. Some have said, look, after all, our official language is English. And so if I speak English to my child, I'm only making my child more fluent in English language. So what's the big deal?
Well, the big deal is that ultimately your child will speak good English, but then wouldn't be useful in certain contexts. Wouldn't be useful in certain contexts. Your child, at some point, if your parents, your grandparents don't speak English, then you succeed in cutting your child off in that they can't communicate with them. When your grandmother visits you or you visit your hometown, your grandmother will have to tell you what they want to tell your child, which for me is sad if we ever got that. And that is where some people are at now, so that your child doesn't feel that they fit in. But this thing about English being the official language and so everybody must speak it. Indeed, the truth is that we don't speak as much English as we think. When you go to the market, they don't speak English. It is the indigenous languages that they speak, the dominant one being Akan. And fortunately for me, I grew up in Tamale, and that is why I learned to speak Chi. So way back in the 80s when I was growing up in Tamale, when you went to the market, people spoke Chi. And so outside of the office, we don't actually speak as much English as we think. Indeed, even now, we speak more Pidgin English than what they will call standard English.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that if you went off and you were left with Raymond alone in a corner, you are likely to speak Pidgin English than what we call standard English. So English is good. We are supposed to master it. And not just English. Every language that we speak, we are supposed to master. We should develop the habit of developing excellence in everything that we do, including linguistic excellence. And for me, everything that we do, we should excel in it, including knowing our native language. And so if we speak English well, yes, good. But then if we shouldn't also lose our native languages. Thank you.
You've talked about how we are denying those children culture and its impact on those children. Now, that's what I want to explore now.
Yeah.
What are the impacts that the indigenous language has on the child that is missing in the English language?
Okay, so this question is an interesting one, because technically we say that a person going to school should be taught in their first languages. And for a lot of people, that is English. Some homes, that is English. And so it is not like a blanket statement that says that everybody going to school must be taught, for example, in a local language. Because if the child doesn't have it, the child doesn't have it. But what we are saying is that every language encapsulates some knowledge system. For example, a lot of diseases, if you listen to their name, they even give you a clue as to what caused the disease and potentially what could be the cure or the treatment options available to you. So we are learning everything about English. The name of the disease is in English, but if we listen for the name of the disease in our local language, we'll get a clue as to what the natives believe is the cause and potentially what the treatment could be. For example, okay, so let's put the disease names aside. Listen to names of local or localities in Accra. There are some of the areas, if you listen for the names, you will notice that these are flood-prone areas because the name suggests that it's a place of depression. And if you know some small Ghana, then you know that everything that has got boo in it is likely to have a depression. And so that is a place that's likely to flood. These are some of the pieces of knowledge encapsulated in our native languages that if we paid attention to, allowed ourselves to master the language, to just give us clues to some of them in the society.
So you're suggesting that even for our own survival and well-being, an appreciation of our native language helps so much compared to the English language.
Absolutely. Because some of the problems we have got local names that suggest how we can deal with them.
So would I be right to suggest that by focusing so much on the English language, we are losing part of our identity?
Absolutely. You know, there's a story told of a child whose parents well-to-do, a young man, I should say, whose parents well-to-do brought the child up, the child speaking English only, and the child went to school abroad. And it was National Culture Day. And everybody came speaking their language, everybody dressed in their, and this child dressed in kente nicely went to the program and was expected to say something in their native language. And the child couldn't do it. And the child then felt how empty it is to know somebody's language and be so fluent in it, but not in his language. You see, there is something about us that is encapsulated in our language. Indeed, it doesn't matter how much mastery we gain in the English language, we are not speakers of English. We are not native speakers of English. That is why sometimes there is a white man cracking a joke, and the person, everybody is smiling, and you are wondering, why are they smiling? Why are they even laughing? How funny is this? Because it is not our language. The people whose language it is get the point. But somebody comes here, you speak Akan, the person doesn't have to say much, and then you get a joke. You see, there are certain things that are encapsulated cultural truths, things that are encapsulated in our languages that we lose once we don't have mastery over the language.
Interesting. So, I mean, all the things that you've talked about, Professor Appah, and, you know, our reality today is that we're faced with some languages going extinct. Could you tell us some of these languages? Then we'll get into the next leg of the conversation that would tell us how do we protect our indigenous language?
Okay. So, generally, languages that are close to dominant languages, let's call them big languages with big numbers of speakers, tend to be endangered. There are people living in the Greater Accra region who feel that Ga is endangered. And the Apanglo Natives research sort of suggests that Ga and Gadangme are endangered, even though I don't really believe it. Because
Prof,
if you go down to where the native Gans are, they speak it. If you go to Choko, they don't speak English, they speak Ga. So that Ga is really not endangered. But a hunter is potentially endangered, because actually my father is a hunter, and I was there. I come from Secondary, even though my mother is from Central Region. You don't hear a hunter in Secondary. It's when you go towards the Apromodo area, that is where you begin to hear a
actually,
hunter.
Unless you get to Agnan Kwanta.
Yes.
Even Apoe is losing it a little bit. So when you get to Agnan Kwanta, then really you'd hear a hunter. Yeah.
So a hunter is potentially endangered, and it's because of infancy. There is, you've seen the research on Dompo. Dompo is seriously endangered. It's one of my colleagues who is researching it. And even the number we have there, one of them was in the late 80s, 90s. So that person potentially is gone now. I've asked what the latest number of speakers is. I hope that I'll get it before we finish this. But the number has gone down. There are some languages in the Volta region, the GTM, we call them GTM languages, Ghana Togo Mountain language. Because of Ewe, they are also potentially endangered, including Chime, because people don't speak it that much. Sele is also potentially endangered. So they are dotted all over. Wherever there is a dominant language, then a language could be potentially endangered. I hope that answers.
It does, and I can understand where you're coming from, because for the Avatime language, there's a blend of a lot of languages. Some have said it's not really Guan.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not Guan. There are people who are originally Ahanta people, having migrated to the Volta region. They've picked a lot of languages. I also appreciate the Ghana Togo Mountain languages, for instance. If you go to the Logba areas today, the speakers have reduced, but these are Guan languages, and so Guan dialects. When we return after these messages, one of the things we're going to talk about, you raised the issue about Ga, because in a lot of the literature, you would find out that the language of the capital city becomes the dominant language in the country. Unfortunately, that is not the same in this country. But there's a school of thought that says the moment scholarship reduces in a language and you struggle for instructors in the language, it means you have a problem. So, Prof, let's wrap it up this way. What must be done to preserve our languages?
Okay. So the first thing that must be done is that we should start speaking the language.
Okay.
At home, we don't typically instruct children in the language because children just pick the language they're exposed to without discrimination.
Okay.
So we know of children who grew up speaking up to 8 or more languages because they grew up in compound houses where there were different families speaking different languages. They were just exposed to them and they picked it. They didn't have to learn it. So if you think that your child comes from school and speaks to you in English and you want to introduce something else to the child, just speak to the child in your native language and the child will pick it. It's as simple as that. If the two parents speak different languages, let the two parents be consistent in speaking their languages. So you, Winston, you speak Fancy to your child and your wife speaks Ewe to the child. The child will grow up learning both languages and any other language they're exposed to. So the first thing, speak the language to your child. That's all. You don't have to do much. Secondly, I think that we should be aware of the benefits of multilingualism wherever we are, because research shows that actually multilingualism has positive effect on your brain. So people who speak multiple languages exercise their brains more, and so are more, I wouldn't want to say intelligent because research doesn't link intelligence directly to language. So, but then they exercise their brains more. So make use of your brain. It benefits. Let us also develop research and sponsor research in these languages. You know, when you were closing the last session, the last part before the messages, you mentioned scholarship in the language.
Yes. And
that is one of the one of the things we need to do, especially for Ghana. We don't find many people studying Ghana, wanting to study Ghana. So that's the problem. For a long time, here at the University of Ghana, our foremost Ghana professor of linguistics was a foreigner, Professor Dakubu. She studied it for well over close to 30 years here at the University of, if not more, at the University of Ghana. We recently only had one more PhD in linguistics who has come to join us here. So we need scholarship in the language. We need to encourage people to write literature in the language so that children can read it and then learn about it. So scholarship in the language is another thing. And I think that we shouldn't overemphasize, as it were, exaggerate the benefits of the economic benefits of English language, because the truth is that it is not the only way we make economic gains linguistically. We know that when you go to Abosokan, they don't speak English there. So it's not true that if you want to really make it, you have to speak English. Of course, in the banking hall, you need English. But even in the banking hall, the bankers have to interact with the people at Abosokan. So it is not true that if you speak the language, then you will not be able to. I can imagine that if they wanted someone to manage a branch at Abosokan, they would want someone who also speaks Chi. If they wanted someone in Tamale to manage a bank and interact, front desk manager, the person must speak the money or should have ability to interact with people in the bank, because the people coming there will not all be speaking English. Finally, I want to mention that indeed there are people who left the shores of this country and went there to study political science and all those things, and noticed that there were a lot more benefits in knowing their native language than they had imagined. I was doing my PhD in Lancaster, and a friend of mine who was then in York called me one morning, excited because he had been called by the Linguistics Department there to come and translate one single sentence into Akan, and he was paid pounds for it. There are somebody returned recently from Michigan, University of Michigan, where they have a lot of language, but they don't have Chi. So people who want to come to Ghana, they just look for students in the university who know how to speak Chi to give them some introductory course before they come to Ghana, so they can also interact with us. So there are a lot of benefits in knowing our native languages, and so we shouldn't give up on it because of the economic benefits that we believe English brings us.
Thank you very, very much for joining us this morning. We'll continue with this conversation, but for now, that's all time would allow us. We're very grateful you made time to join us.
Okay, so I just got to know that the number of Dompo speakers is now reduced to 3.
Oh, it's now reduced to 3.
3, yes. That's the latest number.
Oh, the language is going then.
Yeah.
Wow. Prof, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That's Professor Clement Appah, who is head of the Linguistics Department at the University of Ghana. Let's get on to the phone lines now. Ishmael in Abokobi, good morning.
Hi, Winston.
Yes, Ishmael.
Good morning, yes.
Good morning. Tell us your experience.
This morning program is very, very educating. Dr. Park, thank you so much. You see, we should be proud of our languages. I speak Ghana.
Okay.
And you'll be amazed. I think about 2 weeks ago, I went to a funeral and a tribute was given to me to read. And I decided to do a direct transcription to Ghana, and I read it. And you'll be amazed at the people who heard it. They went more. As if Ghana is just a spoken language today. It's been there for ages. Let us learn our languages and add 2 or 3 languages to it, and we'll be fine.
Okay.
The language goes, the culture goes, your heritage goes. Your sense of even ability of belonging to a society goes away from you. So please, let's keep our language.
All right.
We shall go with us.
Thank you very much, Ishmael in Abokobi. Stephen in Hacho, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, Stephen.
Yes, I am taking it from the spiritual angle or religious.
Okay.
I mean, I think anybody who seems to appreciate what God has given him or her actually offends God. And we normally would speak or criticize people who bleach their skin. For me, I call this one also tongue bleaching. And it is time we appreciated what God has given us. In fact, this time when I go for any outdooring, the advice I give parents is that please, right from the word goes, speak your native language with the baby that God has blessed you with. Because for now, as I speak, we have lost a whole generation to European languages, and we should start changing the narrative. And so for me, that's where I stand. It is an offense to nature. So
Stephen, do you have children?
Despite what God has given you.
Stephen, do you have children?
My point.
Stephen,
yes, I do.
Do you speak your indigenous language to them?
Yes, but I didn't start early, so I am correcting it.
Okay. You're correcting.
And I'm doing that on purpose.
Okay. Yao in Kaneshi, good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, Yao.
Yeah, just to say that we should understand that in God's wisdom, He created all classes of people, all races of people, and placed them in a particular part of the earth, gave them their language, and gave them their culture and their traditions. There's something about your language as it relates to you. And anytime we get disconnected from our language, we are disconnected from our source, and actually it redefines who we are in a negative way. It has always been a long-standing, if you like, a public relations strategy that once you are able to change a people's language, change their names. Because once you change the language, you begin to change their names, you change their culture, what they eat, what they wear, and the rest. They become a sort of standard of who they actually should be. You look all over the world. The Germans are probably the only German-speaking people in the world. But they make sure they speak their language and learn in their language. The Chinese, the Japanese, watch them all over the world. Probably Africans are, and probably some few Asians, are the only people who don't learn from their own languages.
Okay.
So it's a big subject, and we need to go back and discuss it the moment. I'm happy about what you are doing this morning. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let's go to Tema. Claude, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Winston. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Claude. Claude, you have children?
Yes, I have children.
You speak to them in English or in your language?
I'm a Ghanaian and a fan. We speak Fanti. We speak English. We don't usually speak. I speak with my children.
You speak Ghan to your wife?
No, we speak Fanti.
You speak Fanti.
Yeah.
Okay. At least you're speaking one Ghanaian language with them. But you might as well speak the Ghan too. We are in Accra, we are in Tema. But go ahead, make your point, Claude.
Yeah.
Claude, if you could kindly reposition yourself so we can hear you. We can hardly hear you.
Hello.
Yes, I think it's better now. Yes.
Yes. I'm saying that if things are free, we take them for granted. We pay for our kids to go to school, and we expect results. So when they come back, we want to know what they have learned, whether they are, and they have to pass the exams. So we place more emphasis on the English more than the other local languages. But then to play a role. When you come to Accra, because I'm talking about Accra, we have Kaneshi, Mataheko, and those names. But now, those new suburbs coming up, Alaska, New York, they don't even give indigenous name to hold the gun to our communities. But what broke the camel's back, I always say, was the revolution, when the economic empowerment of the Ghans were taken away from them. First, you go to Accra, you want to buy komikekena, kenke and fish. You want to buy mahayokegari, you go to market is gone. But these traders were wiped out of the market. They lost economic power. They went into seclusion. And when you go to Accra, Makola, you cannot even get people speaking Ghana. It's so sad. I go there, I talk to people. You have to Ubeto them.
Claude, thank you very much for joining us. Let's pick our final caller. Promise, good morning.
Good morning, Wilson.
Yes, Promise.
Yes, so I am very much interested in the subject matter. And I think that when you understand your language, you know where you're coming from.
Okay.
Growing up in the village, I could speak more than 10 languages. Kotokoli, Chamba, Basari, Konkomba, Achode, Adele, Chala, Krachi. But when I moved from the village to the city, I've lost most of them. So what we can do is that once in a while we should take our children to the village when they're on holidays, and then when they begin to interact with the people, the local people, they will learn the language and then they will go with them.
Thank you very much, Promise, for joining us.